Okay, you guys. So, if you remember, last time we left off with the idea of the malcontent. Who is the malcontent character? What are the qualities of this character? We said generally it's this disgruntled employee who is not happy with his social status. And we have an example of a malcontent in Shakespeare is Hamlet, who's always not happy with his situation. But here, when it comes to class, we have Busola, and he is the malcontent in the Duchess of Malfi by Webster. And generally, a lot of revenge tragedies of the time tend to feature corrupt courts, and they generally have this character who serves as the malcontent character. He points out basically to the corruption and stupidity of courtly society, okay? Because it's a very, very it's a society that's based on status, okay? And like I said, Hamlet is a famous character who serves as a malcontent character in revenge tragedies, and we will see how Busola also serves as so. Okay, here's a picture of Busola, the malcontent. I believe that you also saw this picture last time when we were in class. Okay, so class is a crucial theme and a crucial issue in the Duchess of Malfi. Okay, now Busola, he comes from a low-born status, and he contributes to the issue of class and the examination of class relations in a very highly stratified society of the time. So this status, the status that he has, causes Busola to envy those who have higher standing, like the dukes, Ferdinand, for example, and he rails, and that they would be railing against them. So the play suggests that he would be just as bad as they are in their position. And that's when Antonio starts to talk about this type of character. And he says, well, you know what? If Busola is actually in Ferdinand's situation, then he would be also as bad. And he says, yet I observe his railing is not for simple love of piety. And we discussed this in class, if you were there last time. And then he says he rails against those people just because he wants to have what they have. It's out of envy, okay? It's not because he is concerned for the well-being of everyone in that society, because he wants to point out corruption. No, I mean, he really does not care about that. According to Antonio, all he wants is to have that social status and to have all that wealth that comes with it. Okay, so that's Antonio's observation about Busola. Busola versus Iago. We discussed this also in class last time. All right. Guys, can you please keep your microphones muted while I talk? And if then later, if you have a question, you can just write it down, and then maybe I can give you the floor. Okay, awesome. So, so Busola, you guys, shares with Iago his status of this disgruntled employee, and we talked about this last time. But we know that Busola has that certain moral awareness, and we discussed this in class last time. He's self-critical. He really doesn't have anything against the Duchess herself or Antonio. He actually likes them, okay? But Iago is just a pure, like he has just this pure resentment toward the other that we cannot even fathom. We don't understand exactly why he behaves the way he does. And you know, a lot of critics talked about the fact that Iago's behavior is something that's just you cannot explain really. It's not merely out of jealousy because the promotion that he didn't get the promotion that he was supposed to get, and that he just hates people because, he just does not like people. So Bussola has that, you can say, moral compass, okay? That Iago certainly does not have. Okay, he just is resentful toward people. So at least if you get a question in the exam, okay, if there is an exam about this, and it says what are the similarities and what are the differences between these two characters, Bussola and Iago, you basically just need to point out that Bussola's problem stems really from the class restriction, because he's a low-born person, and he just envies those people who are above him in status, and he just thinks that if he does what it takes, okay, and what is being asked of him, then okay, maybe I can get to a better place. Maybe I can have a better status in society. And so there's an explanation there. There's an explanation to why he behaves in this way. Okay, it's certainly not out of malice. But when it comes to Iago, it's just pure evil. There is not really a good explanation to why he does the things that he does. Okay, let's now look at the attitudes toward women in early modern times. We explained also in class that women were often thought to have stronger sex drives than men, and so it was always important to keep these women under wraps, okay? And it was always important to make sure that feminine sexuality is under careful control at all times by patriarchy. Now, widows had this very problematic place in society because they escaped the control of their fathers, and then they also escaped the control of the husband. And we know that the Duchess of Malfi is a widow, and we know that they thought of widows as that they had more sexual appetites than single women, just because they have more experience. And so all of this caused women, especially widows, to be viewed as dangerous and untrustworthy and needful of masculine supervision and control at all times. Okay. How did people view marriage in early modern times? So the upper classes often clung to a very medieval view that women should be subservient to their families prior to their marriage, to their fathers, to their brothers, just be there just be there available for their families, okay? And after that, to their husbands after marriage. And so marriage was thought of as a contractual arrangement between families designed to further their status. Like, wealthy people get married to other wealthy people and like wealthy families in order to preserve their money and their status. So it was thought of as a contractual arrangement. And widows were thought to be especially problematic due to the fact that they had first escaped the control of their families and then also escaped that control of their husbands. Okay, so also in early modern times, there was a new strain of individualism that was rising in society, and new views about marriage. So this rise of individualism during those times led to a new stress on romantic love and the idea that marriage should be for love and not be something that's just like a family a contract to further someone's status or make them more wealthy or to preserve a certain societal status. Okay, and so women and men, this new view also stressed that both men and women should be free to marry their partner of choice. Okay, and that person should be compatible to you, and that love should be based on compatibility rather than just some artificial arrangement between families. And so, because this is derived from an individualist Protestant view that marriage was an essential ingredient in human happiness. And so, we can see here that this strain is important for Protestants rather than Catholics, because in Catholicism, before this, marriage was not based on love and compatibility between two people. It's not about a contract between two people, it's about families. Okay? And so, also, this new view was perceived as a threat. A threat to whom? It was a threat by many, especially in the upper classes, because I told you that the upper classes wanted to preserve their power. They wanted to consolidate their power. And if things start to get out of control, and if people just start doing whatever it is that they want to do, okay, that's based on an individual preference, then those classes are in trouble because they start little by little to lose that control that they had. Okay, they start losing that grip. So they were fearful, like I said, that their status might be damaged. Makes perfect sense. And so if their son or their daughter go and marry someone who is less in status. And that's exactly what's happening in the case of the Duchess of Malfi, who is in love with Antonio. Again, see, then love, marriage that is based on love and a marriage that is based on love and compatibility rather than um, uh, rather than social status, and to further your status in society. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so those upper classes, the aristocrats, tended to hold to the older view of marriage as a mechanism. Again, like I said, you guys, they thought of marriage as a contractual arrangement. What does it mean to have marriage as a contractual arrangement? It means that marriage is merely a mechanism for perpetuating family dynasties, because once it is not preserved, once you start getting married to people who are not from your class, then things will get out of control, and they will no longer hold the same power that they had at the time. Okay, and so perpetuating the family dynasties, and middle classes tended to view marriage as a personal union based on mutual affection. Now, I told you at the beginning of all this that the middle class was a rising class at the time. Okay, and that happened with the discovery of America and discovery of gold and various other things, and basically really the beginning of capitalism that made the middle class a that helped form the middle classes. Okay, so here they didn't really have the dominant opinion, okay, regarding what happens in society, but they were definitely rising in power. Okay, and so marriage to them, like I said, it was based on affection, love, union, compatibility. And so we can see that the Duchess of Malfi's views on marriage really mirror middle class views rather than upper classes. So someone type something for me here. Does the Duchess of Malfi belong to the middle class or the aristocratic class? I just want to make sure that you're all following on what I'm saying. Okay, so someone is typing. All right. I suppose someone is probably typing aristocrats. If you think she belongs to the aristocratic class, can you just like say yes? I just want to make sure that everyone is following. Okay, awesome. Great, you guys. All right, so she does belong to the aristocracy, but her views definitely mirror the views of the middle class, the new rising class in society, that thought of marriage as a personal union based on mutual affection. And we can see that, and it's very clear from the love relationship between the Duchess and Antonio. And so marriage was thus part of the conflict of classes that marked the early modern period. And so was the modern time completely, I mean, was the modern time a time that had no conflicts, where the aristocracy basically were in complete power? No, there was a turmoil going on between different views that were rising at that time. Okay, and so again, so the early modern times was basically marked by conflict between classes. Okay, a conflict that would ultimately be won by whom, you guys? By the bourgeoisie. And I've always said that to you, that ultimately this battle, and it's not even like a real battle or war, it's basically based on who has more money. If you have more money, then you have the say on what's supposed to happen in society. Okay. So I can say about the Duchess of Malfi that she's a figure who paved the way, one of the pioneers in paving the way toward new modern views of dealing with when dealing with marriage and love. Okay. Um, and what was the rigid class structure of the Middle Ages? Let's look at it. So the early modern period was a time of great crisis in general. I already told you this. It was a time of turmoil, it was a time of conflict, and so many of the social practices were under threat. And I already said that to you in class many times. If there is a certain behavior that's considered a tradition that happens at a specific place, and if someone comes and tries to do things differently, would that person be a threat? If you think that would cause a threat, just write yes. Do you think if someone comes along and brings in a new social practice to that tradition, would people perceive that as a threat? Exactly. And so many of those social practices were under threat, and perhaps the most important of these was the rigid class structure. Okay. And do you remember at the beginning of this class when we said that Shakespeare's play, Othello, is a tragedy, a domestic tragedy, but the main factor that causes the tragedy in Othello is race, okay? The racial difference between the two people in love. But here in the Duchess of Malfi, it is class. Class is the problem, okay? And not race, because Antonio is from the same place that the Duchess of Malfi is. He's also Italian. But here the problem is that he just comes from a lower class than the Duchess. Okay, And so the class structure that was built and that was the prevailing one during the Middle Ages was built by the aristocratic class, based on aristocratic rule. And so those the aristocracy felt that threat when the middle class were rising in power. The brothers and the Duchess of Malfi clearly see the possibility that the Duchess might marry someone of a lower status like Antonio. And this is a great threat to what? Their personal standings, but also to the entire system that supports them. Okay? Because, like I told you, if there's a certain tradition in a certain society, and then someone within that structure decides to go ahead and do things differently, that person is causing what? Turmoil. And everyone who is going by that tradition would feel that threat. And so that is exactly what's happening over here. The marriage of Antonio and the Duchess can be taken as emblem of coming of modernity. Definitely. Okay? We said that she's definitely a modern figure who is defying all societal rules and class structure, but also she is placing herself in a place of danger. Okay? So the aristocratic brothers who oppose the marriage are depicted as corrupt. I mean, we do know that the Duchess brothers are corrupted figures in this play, and it's kind of ironic, okay? And they're also pathologically obsessed with controlling the sexuality of their sisters. I mean, we know that women's sexuality at the time was under check, but I mean, I think when it comes to her brothers, it's just a little bit exaggerated, and probably it makes perfect sense that it is exaggerated. Probably John Webster wants it to be exaggerated because at the end of the day, this is a fictional story. I mean, this is fiction, you guys, but fiction mirrors something that happens at the society of the time. And generally, when you have fiction, it needs to be a little bit dramatic in order to achieve that purpose behind it. And so the brothers of the Duchess, they also seek to maintain strict boundaries between the classes. They don't want suddenly to have loose boundaries or basically to blur the boundaries between the aristocracy and the other classes. They want it to be completely strict. So by allowing the Duchess to transgress these boundaries, okay, and to take charge over her own sexuality, we definitely see that the play moves into some very modern territory. I mean, by definition, this play is considered very modern just because it's called The Duchess of Malfi. The main character here in the play is a woman. And so that alone is a very clear example on how modern and how this play moves into the modern, the territory of a work that is really modern. Okay, and so though the transgressive marriage will lead to a disaster. I mean, do you think this will be like a happily ever after story, like where the Duchess and Antonio will live happily ever after? Or do you think this will end in murder and tragedy? Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. No, 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 Sundus. I mean, sorry, not Sundus Hajar. It's not going to be happy. It definitely will be a great tragedy. Okay? Yeah. Yes. So, but the thing is, what we need to learn here is that the the character of the Duchess is a totally new type of character. All right, the fact that she defies the society, that she just decides to do what she wants based on her sense of individualism makes we can take that and her marriage to Antonio as an emblem of coming of modernity, paving the way for more modern times to come. Okay, so the aristocratic brothers, yeah, I mean, we already discussed this. So this marriage will end in a disaster. It is portrayed in a mostly positive light as based on mutual love and compatibility. So that is something good. But we also have that sympathy toward the Duchess and her situation. And so in a way, it shows that we as readers have those modern values. Okay. So let's move forward. Okay. Is it okay? I think it's taking a while. Okay. So Stuart, Antonio occupies a relatively humble position. Like I said to you in class, when you think of Antonio's character, do not think that he comes from a low class like Bussola. He comes from a lower class, okay, a steward. So we have different characters in different plays at the time who occupy the same position, like Malvolio in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, and different other characters as well. He is allowed, especially in his conversations with Delio, to serve as a commentator. And we see actually his role as a commentator at the beginning. I mean, the play opens up with his conversation with Delio, and he was commenting on the French court versus the Italian court. Do you remember that? So who was the first person who was talking at the beginning of the play? It was Antonio. And so what does this tell us, you guys? It tells us that he's still respected. He's a respected figure, right? So he's respected. He presents a direct challenge to elitism. What is elitism? Basically, class structure. Okay. And so we see that he's not on the same page as the Duchess brothers. The Cardinal and Ferdinand. Okay. So Antonio on Ferdinand and the Cardinal, the brothers. Antonio comments on the two chief enemies in the play and to help audiences see them as untrustworthy and dishonest. And we know that they are dishonest and they are untrustworthy. As characters who present one side to the outer world. And we remember a famous saying by someone in Shakespeare, in Othello particularly, who said that I'm not, I mean, I don't remember the exact words, but he says something like that he is not who you think he is, that he is something on the inside that is not what he chooses to show to the others. Do you remember that? And so Antonio here says that those brothers, the Duchess brothers, are also like this. Ferdinand and the Cardinal are people who present one side of them to the public. I am not what I am. Great, Anwar. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So they present one side of them to the world, but then actually on the inside, they're manipulative people. They're dishonest. And so the brothers are essentially presented as actors. And that is another important feature in this play. The fact that someone is presented as an actor who play roles. They're just simply playing roles in front of the world. And when they revert back and go to their inner lives, they're just like something that's completely different. So it's also a relatively modern idea, first expressed in literature in Hamlet, when Hamlet said, I have that within which passeth show. What does that mean? What did Hamlet mean when he said that? This also shows you guys a development in the psychology, an inner psychology that previous plays, okay, medieval plays did not have. And earlier times, for example, Greek and Roman plays also did not have that inner psychology that Hamlet possessed. And moving forward, we also, but like actually, Hamlet is the single figure in literature who expressed clearly the idea of an inner psychology, that he was tormented. He says that he has something inside his psychology, inside his mind, that he cannot express to others. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit more on the relationship between the Duchess and Antonio. Okay. Antonio's love toward the Duchess is expressed in a way that's called Petrarchan love. What is Petrarchan love? We're going to learn about that. Petrarch is actually a person. He's an Italian scholar and a poet who lived from 1304 to 1374. He was known for his poems of praise and love dedicated to a mysterious woman named Laura. Apparently, from what I understand, that Laura was a 13-year-old girl. So that kind of makes things interesting. Okay. So, and one of the most important runners of the Renaissance and one of the founders of humanism was Petrarch. So, what is Petrarchan love? Now I'm going to define it to you. So, Antonio's hyperbolic and exaggerated, overdone praise for the Duchess participates in the once popular discourse of Petrarchan love. So, the way that he loves the Duchess is expressed in a Petrarchan tone. All right. Have you ever heard of al-hubb al-udri, you guys? Udri love, platonic love. Okay. So it is similar to this kind of love, where the lover, we know Majnoon Layla. Do you know Majnoon Layla? Mm-hmm. So when he praised Layla and he wrote all those love poems about her, he really never talked about her physical beauty. And there is actually one poem where he says that they say that Layla looks so and so, like basically that it expressed that Layla is actually not good looking. And he basically, to him, he says that she thinks, in his opinion, that she is the most beautiful woman in the world. And so, because in Petrarchan love, or let's say Platonic type of love, the lover expresses his love in a very hyperbolic tone. It's kind of exaggerated and overdone, and it has a lot of praise for the lover. And you can definitely see that in Qais's poems to Layla, right? He's Majnoon Layla. I mean, when you say Majnoon, crazy, crazy in love, isn't that on its own something that is very exaggerated and overdone, over the top, as they say? Mm-hmm. So yeah, um, that is why I want you, when you think about this type of love, it's a little bit of an old style of loving, definitely exaggerated. So it's not a new style. And like I said, we are entering modern times over here. And so this mode of expressing love is a little bit uh just weird, okay? And so it's not really popular. So this kind of tells you something, that Antonio kind of belongs to an older school when expressing his love toward the Duchess of Malfi. So the male lover praises the loved woman and her beauty in terms that go beyond the physical possibility. Again, it really reminds me of Majnoon Layla and that platonic love, الحب العذري. Udri love, it goes beyond the physical goes beyond the physical beauty of your lover. Okay, and so you emphasize in that type of love your devotion to your lover in very excessive terms. So this convention was somewhat out of fashion by by the time of the Duchess of Malfi. And so when you look at Antonio and the way he expresses his love to the Duchess, people around him feel like this is a little bit over the top. This is a little bit like overdone. And even Delio points out that to him and says, "Hey, Antonio, dude, like chill, you know? Um, just like don't express your love in this very exaggerated way." So guys, for the purposes of the exam or the quiz or whatever it is that's going to come, if you ever get a question that deals with patriarchal love, please do not talk about it in a way that's positive. It is not positive. It's actually considered a kind of an outmoded way of expressing your love. Okay, so old fashioned. Now, let's see. Let's move forward. Okay. Again, here's an example here on Antonio's praise of the Duchess. He says, all her particular worth grows to this sum. She stains the time past, lights the time to come. Okay. In other words, he says that the Duchess is so remarkable that even when she dies, she will still basically live. All right. And so the patriarchal love often claims that his love has power over him, using the form in the Duchess of Malfi has a special irony. Why a special irony? Because the Duchess herself is the one who has the power over Antonio. And we know why the Duchess has power over Antonio is because she comes from an upper class. She's more powerful. She is the Duchess. She is the ruler of Malfi, right? Okay, so there are a lot of productions of this plays in the 1950s and 60s, where that present the brothers, where we see the Duchess through her brother's descriptions, if you know what I mean. It presents the Duchess as a person who is a highly sexed widow, and that is really problematic. And a lot of feminists later on wrote on this and talked about how problematic it is that we in these adaptations and productions see the Duchess through the light, through presented through her brother's perspective. So more recent interpretations see the play as suggesting that this view is misogynistic. Okay. You know what misogynistic means. It means like a hateful way of presenting women by men or anyone else, anyone who's hateful toward women. Okay. And so the initiative taken by the Duchess with regard to Antonio is not the result of an overactive libido. Okay. And it's not because she's oversexed. It's because she's a natural person. She's in love. She's in love, and that's just perfectly normal. When you are in love, you have a romantic side and you have a sexual side, and that's also absolutely normal. And so when you're reading it without filtering it through the brother's perspective, then you see that the Duchess is just a normal person. Okay. Let's move forward. Deconstructing the angel-whore opposition. I mean, I already explained to you how women were often portrayed during the times as occupying one of two poles. You're either an angel, a pure angel, with no sexual thoughts whatsoever. You remember Desdemona's dad in Othello and how he thought of his daughter as a maiden never bold. Do you remember that? My daughter is so innocent, and she's just this like little girl who would never dare to venture and do anything. And so women would, like, there are two slots for women. You are either a pure angel, or you are a harlot, okay, who is completely out of control, and who is just controlled by lust. And so you're either this or that. So the Duchess basically comes and deconstructs this opposition. She deconstructs it by presenting us with a woman character who has healthy sexual appetites. It's not excessive, and it's not out of control, but she has them, and that's perfectly normal. And you guys remember, it's because the Duchess of Malfi, in a way, really mirrors Protestant views rather than the Catholic views that were based on marriage that is being thought of as a contract, where you only actually have sex because you want to, for the purpose of bringing children to the world, right? And that should be the only purpose, and there should be no enjoyment whatsoever. And that is why like when you have a figure like the Duchess of Malfi, it kind of becomes problematic. Like, oh, she actually has this love relationship with Antonio, and she's being expressive. And so she's just a modern figure, a completely modern figure that's kind of baffling to them. The wedding is a key moment in this play because it kind of shows us the question of power dynamics between Antonio and the Duchess. So we're going to see that in a little bit. First of all, it kind of projects harmony and mutuality, suggesting that it is conceived within in the mode of compatibility. Two people who are in love and want to be with each other. Okay. As Antonio and the Duchess deliver their lines, they perform a sort of a duet. Okay. Like when you're like in a song and there are two people who are singing like their lines of love toward each other. And so in a way, this is a symbol of their mutual love. Okay. And there is a very important line here that the Duchess says when she says, "We now are man and wife, and it is the church that must echo this." What does this mean, you guys? What does it mean? Now, generally, when people get married, they have to echo the church, right? They have to abide by the church and what the church wants from them. Here, what's happening is that the Duchess is flipping that table. She's flipping the roles. And so there is a change in the power dynamics. She's subverting it. She's subverting power dynamics. So instead of them echoing the church, she says the church must echo us. And so marriage as primarily a matter between the individuals involved. So we are the individuals. We decided to do this. And so now the institution's role is to what? Ratify this decision. You just come and say, I bless this decision. This is a blessed union. I bless this union between these two people. But it is not up to the church to start saying, no, you should do this. No, you shouldn't do this. So again, if you get a question in an exam that asks you to talk about, do you think that the Duchess of Malfi is a modern figure? If so, if yes, explain. Do you think she's a modern figure, you guys? This woman? Do you see her as a modern figure who is an emblem of modernity? She definitely is. Yep, definitely. Okay. And so again, she says, we decide, we make the decision, and the church just basically says, okay, I bless this union. The power dynamics of this marriage, now we get to this. One of the most subversive aspects of this play is that Webster never lets us forget that the differential in power between the two lovers. We know for sure, it's very obvious when you're reading the play, if you have read it already, that the Duchess has more power, far more power in this relationship than does Antonio. The Duchess also takes the lead in pursuing Antonio during their courtship, right? These aspects, what do? They reverse the power dynamic. I told you when it comes to religion and the church, there is a subversion in power dynamics. And also when it comes to the marriage dynamics between these two people, we definitely see a reverse in power dynamics. Generally, the man would take the lead, right? A man. Have you ever heard of a woman going and proposing to a man? I mean, at least here, it really doesn't happen, barely. And when you hear of it, you're like, what? A woman proposing to a man? Right? Yeah. And so, but here, when the Duchess takes the lead, we definitely realize here that power dynamics here are what? Reversed, right? And they're not conventional. Are the are the power dynamics conventional here? And the gender roles, we have what? A reversal in gender roles, which would grant the man more power and see him as the more active partner in the courtship. But here we have a complete flip in power dynamics, where the Duchess is the person with the power and the person who's taking the lead. Okay, so again, more on the reversal of gender roles in the play. The Duchess frequently asks Antonio not to freak out. She says, everything will be okay, everything will be fine. You remember, you guys, if you're reading the play already, you realize that they are feeling now after marriage that they are under threat. The brothers are trying to figure out what their sister is up to. They suspect that the Duchess probably has gotten married, and they're trying to figure out who the husband is. Okay. And so Antonio here is getting really nervous. And so, generally, in typical relationships, conventional relationships with typical gender roles, who is the person who comes and starts reassuring the other when there is some kind of crisis? The man or the woman? Exactly, the man. Yes, Yasmin. Yasmin, I'm recording this, so yeah, hopefully you'll be able to listen to it later. Okay, and so yes, the man. Good job, you guys. Yes. So the man generally is the one who deals with moments of crises, and here, like I said, we're seeing more of that gender reversal in the roles, and that is why um, we see the Duchess reassuring Antonio over and over, telling him everything will be okay. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't worry. I'll try to figure out a solution for us. Okay? So, and then Antonio here actually, he freaks out even more. What does he say? He says, these words should be mine. So, what does he mean when he says these words should be mine? He's really commenting on the role of the Duchess, how she's the one who is reassuring him. And he is telling her that I am the one who is supposed to reassure you and not the other way around. So the play stages a cross-class marriage. Again, our focus in this play is on the dynamics of class, okay, and class restriction and class structure. And so We have this cross class-based boundaries also disrupts traditional gender roles. So the Duchess of Malfi is going against the class structure by marrying Antonio, and then she's also going against the conventional gender roles, right? So that is really interesting. We have one strong woman here. Okay. Oh, all right. Just a second. Do you still see the slide? I don't know where the slide went. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I don't see the role the Duchess of Malfi assumes in this play. Some critics suggest that she plays a new role. Is it a new role? It is definitely a new role, that of a female hero. Okay, so through both her words and her deeds, she's the one with action. She's the one who takes lead. She's the one who reversed gender roles. She's the one who crossed class boundaries. And so, are these traits of a hero? I mean, she's the title figure, right? So she is definitely the hero of this play. She knowingly breaks the rules of accepted conduct, social conduct of her class, and she is brave to face these consequences. So when the Duchess of Malfi breaks the rules of accepted social conduct, does she know? A very strong, yeah, I agree with you. She's a very strong woman indeed. When she breaks those rules of an accepted social or feminine conduct, do you think that the Duchess knows that she will be in trouble? Do you think she knows that? No, I would argue and say that she definitely knows that that behavior is not accepted by her society. But she goes ahead and she decides to do it anyway. Why? Because she's a new modern figure. And I mean, we've discussed this in class multiple times on different characters. If you are not going to lead the way for new social behaviors, then things are just going to stay the same. So there has to be that one person who has to be the sacrificial figure. You need to sacrifice in order for things to change. Don't you agree? Exactly. And so she is willing to even pay her life for that. Yeah. And so she knowingly breaks those rules. That this decision leads to what? Disaster. Those suggest what? How difficult it is to overcome convention. Guys, do you think it is easy to overcome tradition? If there is a behavior that has been there throughout history and a certain practice, do you think you can just break that very easily and say it's okay, I can get away with that? Or do you think there would be consequences for doing so? Yep, definitely. There would be consequences. And so the Duchess of Malfi, she realizes that, but she's like, I'm going to do what I believe in no matter what. Yeah, exactly, Anwar. That's absolutely correct. Here is the Duchess of Malfi in a film adaptation. And here's another one that helps give the play a very modern feel. The film Hotel 2001 basically is an adaptation of the Duchess of Malfi. types of irony in this play. We have dramatic irony, and it occurs when the audience knows something about what is going on that one or more of the characters does not know. And we're going to see this in the Duchess of Malfi. In the Duchess of Malfi, we realize that the Duchess plans to marry Antonio before he does. She says, I'm going to marry this man. I love him. And so he does not know about that. So emphasizing how what? Thoroughly she is in charge of the situation, not he. So who is in charge of the situation? Noha, I really think it is not about her power. I really think that she knows that she will be in trouble. She knows that there would be consequences for her action. And she realizes that that she will probably face actually a death penalty. She really knows. But she's like, I'm going to go ahead and do what I think is the right thing. And so, okay, let me get back to the dramatic irony. And so we know that she wants to propose to Antonio. And so that kind of goes under dramatic irony. Although also later on, when the Duchess thinks that her family is dead, the audience knows that the family is not dead. Okay? That also goes under dramatic irony. Verbal irony occurs when a text says one thing, but clearly intends to suggest something quite different. Okay? That's like verbal irony when you say like, wow, how amazing you are, but you really actually mean the opposite of amazing. So that's verbal irony. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing. Webster uses a variety of tools to foreshadow the dark ending of the play. From the very beginning, we see Antonio's fear of the Duchess brothers and his sense that the match will be very dangerous for him, right? So when you foreshadow the future, do you remember that the scene in the last scene of Act 4 in Othello, when they were preparing for Desdemona's bed in her bedchamber? That scene is a foreshadowing scene that foreshadows what's going to happen later when she gets murdered. So when a scene suggests something that's going to happen later in the future. So Webster's language frequently turns to images of death and violence, leading us to expect that something very bad might be about to happen. Okay. In Act 2, the discovery, there is 9 months that the play skips from Act 1. And here we know that Bussola during this time is trying to determine whether the Duchess is pregnant, and on Ferdinand's discovery of the marriage of the Duchess of Malfi. So they're still trying to figure out, she got married. Okay, who's her husband? And is she pregnant? So how do their brothers react to their sister's marriage? Both Ferdinand and the Cardinal are furious when they realize that she has married Antonio. They both respond in misogynist cliches, okay, about their sister. And we here see Ferdinand's reaction in particular that's very obsessive and pathological. And we realize later that Ferdinand is actually her twin brother. And it kind of explains to you a little bit why he's obsessed with his sister. You know, this whole bond between twins, right? But he's just like over the top in his reactions toward his sister. And so Ferdinand reacts in ways that are based on class stereotypes. You know, we said we have class restriction, obsessing on a vision of Antonio as a sort of lower class, sexually powerful brute. Do you guys remember? I mean, this is really interesting. Do you know why? Because a lot of times those stereotypes are used when it comes to class structure restrictions, when it comes to dealing with the racial others. The same stereotypes are actually used. And that's why you kind of just makes you think of how ridiculous stereotypes and generalization is. Do you remember Iago having the same exact ideas of on Othello's sexuality? Do you remember that? But the reason there was not about class structure, because we know that Othello comes from a good family, right? From like an upper class family. So here the reason is really class. And so you kind of see how they just use these stereotypes interchangeably based on whatever they like, whatever the situation is that they're dealing with. Okay. And similar stereotypes about working class men have been promulgated throughout the centuries. So it shows you how ridiculous stereotyping is and how inaccurate it is. Okay, Ferdinand's violent vision for Antonio. He fantasizes about wreaking a violent revenge on Antonio. And he says, maybe I will force him to eat his own child. Wow. What a disgusting image. I mean, he's that sick. He's imagining that he probably can bring Antonio and he can force him to eat his own child, his own fetus. So, yeah, can see how dark the language is becoming. Conclusions in this. Like in Othello, Shakespeare explores the link between love and sexual jealousy that turns into violence. Okay, it's very evident there. Webster also explores these same themes in The Duchess of Malfi, but complicates the depiction of the dark side of sexual desire by exploring the consequences of a brother's desire for his sister. In Shakespeare, the love match is complicated by race. In Webster, it is complicated by class. We remain until the end fascinated by this play today because of the way its themes resonate with our modern post-Freudian understanding of the nature of the psyche and sexual desire. Ferdinand, the Duke of Calabria, seems to suffer from some very modern pathological sexual impulses toward his sister. And we already discussed this. So he seems to be obsessed with his sister in a sick way. Okay? It's not only because of the class restriction. There seems to be more regarding that matter. Okay? And so let's just go over the second part of this next time. I'm going to make this presentation. Yes, okay, sure, Sundus. So I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna upload it to you on LMS, and you're also gonna have this recorded lecture. The lecture that I just gave to you was recorded, and so it's gonna be available to you. I'll set another time for all of you and send you a message to come and attend. We will finish our discussion on the Duchess of Malfi. All right. Okay. And so if you have any questions, please send me your messages on LMS. And I'm going to stop the recording for now. Okay, you guys. So I stopped the recording. This lecture is recorded.